So by now, you all probably know that Season 1 has been extended until Season 2 comes out with OB66. I wasn't originally going to do a drafting guide for OB65, but now that the season has been extended, I can't leave y'all hanging. OB65 didn't get many balance tweaks, so there isn't a whole lot that's different, but what is different is still very important. Now, before I get started, let me bring up the disclaimer that I bring up before every one of these videos. This guide is made from my experience in Diamond and Master level games, both competitive and in scrims. I also play on PC, so with that in mind, some things may not entirely apply to you if you're in one of the lower ranks or if you're on console. Now that that's out of the way, let's go ahead and get started. Like always, let's start off with the tanks. Also, like always, Makoa is the best tank in the game. I'm getting really tired of having to say that every update, but I don't see it becoming any different anytime soon, so oh well. Makoa's hook is basically a guaranteed pick on whoever he lands it on. No tank can beat that. Makoa is the best. He is a first pick or ban every time. Then there's Torvald, who is second only to Makoa. Torvald's bubble is so powerful, especially with his new legendary. Giving somebody 2,000 more health for 4 seconds is arguably overpowered, especially with CC immunity on top of that. This bubble can save anybody from practically anything. Maldamba Fear, Inara Stun, anything. The bubble will either block the CC, or if Torv puts it on an ally while they're being CC'd, it'll take the CC off. So you could possibly get hooked by Makoa and Torv can bubble you and stop you from being pulled in. That is only the defensive capabilities of it though. It's equally as powerful offensively. That extra health allows DPS characters to go in and cause a lot more problems for the other team. It's very powerful at any DPS, but it's even more powerful with flanks. Buck can jump in, get bubbled, and easily get a kill to get a cooldown reset and get back out. The same with Talus. You can even bubble your Talus while he's ulting, and he'll take the bubble with him across the map. So not only does he have an instant escape with his rune, but he also has more health and CC immunity. The only real way to counter Talus is through CC, and Torv takes that weakness away. Now, Torv's ult may not be useful on every map, but that bubble is always going to be useful no matter what, so Torv is also a first pick or ban. Now let's talk about Ashe and Inara. These two ladies have also proven to be very powerful, but they aren't quite on the level of Makoa and Torv. In the past, you could say they were, but not right now. So Ashe is good because of her Slug legendary. In the last drafting guide, I didn't really explain how powerful Ashe was because I didn't really realize how massive the legendary's hitbox was. It is huge. The hitbox is still the same now, but the damage was nerfed and that knocked her off of the first pick or ban seat. So now Ashe is a second pick. You definitely want to pick her up early because Ashe has the best poke and consistent damage out of every tank. Then there's Inara. Inara is still the queen of soaking up damage. If you need somebody to sit on point and tank abuse, then Inara is your girl. Unlike Ashe though, there are some maps where Inara isn't all too great, like Fish Market for example. But outside of stuff like that, Inara is a great second pick as well. You want to get these two early because if you don't, the enemy team will. Like let's say Makoa and Torv are banned and your team has first pick. And that is only a single pick by the way. If you grab something like Bomb King, then the enemy team can pick up both Ashe and Inara because their first pick is 2 picks. Then you only have the weaker tanks to pick from, and that puts you at a disadvantage. Now, speaking of the other tanks, well, those first 4 I talked about were the only good ones. Fernando is okay, he isn't fantastic, but he's far from bad. Ruckus is good, but he's bugged. When he fires his rockets, they stop his miniguns from firing, and that severely hurts his DPS. So a lot of people have been avoiding him because of that. Terminus has been nerfed too many times and he can't tank as effectively as the other tanks anymore. Then finally there's Barrack, and like I said before, Barrack is a DPS tank that is all about area control, and there's a lot of area denial in the game as well as tanks that do DPS better than him. Back before he got all those nerfs, he had enough DPS to compensate for the area denial, but the nerfs took all that away. Really, out of these 4 tanks, the only one you want to take if you have to is Fernando. If 2 tanks are banned, then you'd have to take Barrack, Ruckus, or Terminus as well. Now on to the damagers. Cassie. Cassie is still overpowered. Very overpowered. You're always going to want to ban her or first pick her. When it comes to first picking her, here's how you do it. If your team has the first ban, then you don't ban Cassie. Ban Torv or Makoa. Then, if the other team doesn't ban Cassie, you can first pick her. Now, let me make this clear. If Cassie doesn't get banned and you're able to first pick her, you have to, because if you don't, the enemy most definitely will. They'd be insane not to. If your team has the second ban and you see that the other team banned something else, then ban Cassie, because you don't want them to get her. In a perfect world, Cassie is always banned. Now, I did say earlier that if you pick up a DPS when Makoa and Torv are banned, then the enemy can take Ashe and Inara at the same time. This is definitely a weird situation to be in. It sucks to give up the good tanks, but Cassie can put out so much DPS, and countering her isn't the easiest thing when Cassie can just sit back super far away. Even snipers aren't too good at dealing with her because Cassie can spam 10 arrows at where they're trying to peek her from, not to mention her role can quickly get her behind cover. Last update, Bomb King was also very ban-worthy because of how stupidly overpowered Royal Subjects was. It got a nerf though, and even though it is still pretty stupid and honestly needs to be reworked, it isn't powerful enough to make him a must ban anymore. He is still a good first pick, but only really if your team is second pick, because then you can get 2 picks. But if your team is first pick, you only get 1 pick, so it's better to grab a tank if Cassie is banned. But again, if your team is second pick, then you could pick up BK with a tank. Now, we all know this, but it's very rare to see a good BK. If you don't have a good BK player on your team, don't get him, because the BK will feed and do little damage. It happens 9 out of 10 times. I know it can be appealing to take BK from the other team in case they have a good BK, but having a useless DPS on your team isn't worth it. BK can be poked out by characters with range, so if the enemy team does get him, just get something like Leanne or a sniper. So BK and Cassie were the big kids, now let's move on to the others. Drogoz is still a good pick if you need a blaster, even though he is definitely second to BK pretty much all the time. I think the only map that I would pick Drogoz over BK on is Frog Isle. If you are going to pick Drogoz, do it later in the draft. The earlier you pick him, the most likely you are to get countered, and Drogoz has a lot of counters, just like Willow, who you should never pick. Now, you may wonder what's the difference between Drogoz and Willow. I mean, it makes sense that if both are very easily countered, then both should be bad. Well, Drogoz has enough power to compensate for being easily countered. Willow does not. Willow is pretty weak. The only thing that Willow ever had over the other blasters was Dead Zone, because back then it could block off all healing. That made her arguably the best counter to Inara, because Inara's 60% increased healing from Earthen Guard wouldn't be a thing. Unfortunately, they did nerf Dead Zone and made it only block 90% of healing, so Inara's Earthen Guard can lower Dead Zone down to 30%. They really need to undo that Dead Zone nerf because Willow serves no purpose right now. Moving on, we have Leanne and Xiaolin. Just like before, both are very good direct damage picks. They both get out a lot of damage and they both have great poke. There aren't many situations where they're bad either. They can both deal with flanks, Leanne reasonably well, Xiaolin very well, and they both can deal with Drogoz, Leanne very well, Xiaolin reasonably well. Then there are the snipers who also deal with Drogoz very well. I do want to add, but they're more susceptible to flanks here, but Hi-Rez doesn't want flanks to be useful, so I can't really say that. Kinessa's new legendary lets her get away from anything instantly, and Strix's new legendary makes it so he can duel any flank that comes his way. Both are fantastic snipers, but in all honesty, I'd say Kinessa is better because reposition can be really, really stupid. Now, since they are snipers, they aren't good in every map. Avoid picking them on maps like Bright Marsh and Jaguar Falls, but pick them early on Timbermill. They run that map. As for the other maps though, it's best to pick them later on so they won't get countered. Sometimes people will lock in their DPS picks early and then they aren't able to get a counter for a last pick sniper. Now for Victor and his clones, Tyra and Vivienne. I'm mostly kidding about the clone thing, by the way. Victor is in a great spot right now thanks to his new legendary. He isn't great on every map, but on maps where teams are forced to stay together, he is fantastic. Those are maps like Frog Isle and Ice Mines. Vic is a go-to DPS for those maps. His grenades will easily hit multiple targets and rack up a ton of damage, which will also get you a ton of ults. Moving on to Tyra. For a while now, Tyra has been that character that is under the radar good. Like on the surface, everyone thinks Tyra is really bad, but that's not really true. Tyra can hold her own and prove useful. The thing is, there's a lot of other safer options. As for Vivienne, Vivienne is not good at all really. Vivienne is really easy to deal with at higher levels, and picking her is really just a waste. Really, any damage is a better pick than her. To put it simply, Vivienne is the damage version of Skye. And that's a shame, because Sapper rounds are really good, and if Vivienne was designed a bit differently, then that legendary alone could make her worth picking to make barriers useless from the start of the game. Now for the supports. So in the past, Mal and Genos were the best, and if one was banned for some reason, then you could go with Seris and you'd be fine. Well, not anymore, because Mal and Seris are the only two real main healers in the game. Lenos got nerfed with bound mode because his cards became too weak and he could no longer sustain a team on his own. He also got a direct nerf to his movement ability on top of that. Even with Celestial, Lenos isn't a good solo healer. He can't sustain a team anywhere near as well as Mal or Ceres can. He's basically an off healer now, so he's more suited for a 2-healer setup with Luminary, so you can buff up your DPSs. I have been seeing that a lot of people are having trouble making the swap from Lenos to Ceres. They keep picking Lenos as a solo healer and their team struggles because of it, and yes, in a fair game the other team will punish your team if you have a Lenos solo healing it. Lenos can't keep up with all the damage a good enemy team can put out. Ying, well, I was really hopeful that Ying would be good, but Ying is the worst character in the game still. Ying has been nerfed so much and it's made her healing output so low. There is no reason to pick her. Main healers have good healing and off healers have good damage. Ying doesn't have either. The other healers outclass her greatly in both of those categories. It is very unfortunate. I mean, come on, look at that face, Hi-Rez. How can you let something like that be so bad for so long? Have a heart. Then there's Grok, Grover, and Pip, who are all fantastic off healers. Grok can have great damage with Maelstrom, and if you get him on Frog Isle or Ice Mines, he'll be doing a ton of damage, since those maps force teams to stick together. He also has Totemic Ward to both improve his healing output and counter CC. Also, for some reason, people like to ignore Grok from what I've seen. Like, they think he's not a threat, so they let him do whatever he wants and he wins because of it. Anyone else notice that? Grover gets out great long distance damage with Ferocity, and he's great on any of the maps that snipers would normally be good on. He can also get out good healing with his new legendary. I would go as far as to say that with that legendary, Grover is a better solo healer than Lenos is with Celestial. Pip is different in the sense that Pip should really always be ran as a damage. Catalyst lets you put out a lot of damage, and it also helps you get your ultimate up very quickly, and Pip's ult can be one of those game-changing ones. But yeah, to be clear, if you want a solo healer, get Mal or Ceres, and if you want to run dual healers, pick 2 off healers, or Wakono's Cursed Damba with an off healer. That works pretty well too. Just never pick Ying. Ever. I know Ying mains. It hurts me too. Ying was my first main, believe it or not. Now for flanks, the most disappointing of the 4 classes. There are 2 good flanks right now, Talus and Buck. That's it. These 2 have no competition whatsoever. If you need a flank, it's gonna be one of those 2. Talus is better because he has an instant escape that can get him out of nearly any situation, but Buck's strong self-sustain still makes him a good pick. Also, like I said earlier, if you can get either of these 2 with a Torvald, then the enemy team is going to have to go through hell. I could probably stop the video right there, but some don't like it when I skip over characters. Fair enough, I wouldn't want to see my favorites left out either. So Maeve, Xin, and Lex are sorta like Fernando, not great, but not bad either. Maeve is unfortunately only good with her new legendary. They nerfed her so much that running any of the other 3 is suicide. Street Justice's burst sorta makes up for all the damage they took away from her. However, even with Street Justice, Maeve isn't worth picking over Talus and Buck. If they can undo some of those nerfs to Maeve, any of those nerfs to Maeve, then that would be great because I can't remember the last time I've seen Maeve outside of casuals. Now Xin. Okay, a lot of you may be surprised to hear this out of my mouth, but Xin isn't bad. He has self-sustain with Smolder, and even without Smolder, Billow can still get the cutoff for Xin's healer to easily heal him. Billow has cards that makes it longer and faster too, so he'll be able to get into line of sight of his healer pretty easily. If you're not running Smolder, then you're running Yomi, since it gives you more damage and infinite range on your heavy attack. Those are the only 2 ones that are worth picking on him. Now, in case you're wondering why I now think he's good, I think cards Unbound, the way the card system works now, where everything's at like level 4, helps him out quite a bit, because it makes his Billow a lot stronger. Lex is in roughly the same spot as them as far as viability goes, maybe a little less, but still close enough. The thing about Lex is you only really want him on Bright Marsh and Jaguar for the most part. Those are the maps he's best on. Then there's Androxus, Eevee, and Sky. You're never going to want to pick any of these, regardless of the situation. Bound mode crippled Androxus heavily, basically like cutting off a character's legs. As for Eevee, bugs have crippled her. Eevee just keeps getting more and more buggy, and Hi-Rez just won't fix her. Sky, well, it's Sky. Do I really have to say more than that? Illuminate makes her useless because her invis is the only way Sky is going to get close enough to deal damage. Even without Illuminate, Stealth is very, very predictable. There is also Mowgli, but our little red fuzzball won't be available in competitive until OB66, and that's when Season 2 comes out. Hopefully they buff her up with OB66 because right now, there's absolutely no reason to pick her. And that's it. That's every character. At least I'm pretty positive it is. Now again, this is the last drafting guide for this season. When Season 2 comes out, there's going to be a lot of balance updates with it, so I see the meta completely swapping around, and hopefully for the better. With 4 bans coming, it's very, very important that Hi-Rez makes every character viable. Imagine if we had 4 bans now, and 2 of those bans were Mal and Ceres. That game would have to be played with weak healers. Also, since we only have 4 good tanks right now, imagine if all 4 of them got banned. So yeah, I'm very hopeful that Hi-Rez stops looking at statistics and starts looking at the actual meta of the game, because balancing based off of statistics has gotten us all nowhere. It would be best if they looked at the higher tier meta because that's the best way to make a balanced game that rewards skill. Because balancing around the low tier meta just makes characters like flanks useless because people can't hit them or refuse to learn how to counter them. A competitive game like this should promote getting better and learning to succeed. And that's pretty much it, guys. I want to thank you all for watching. I very much appreciate it, and I'm going to see you guys later. Bye!